to be talking about modeling the attenuation of structural uplift beneath large lunar craters. Ross, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Brad. So I just want to acknowledge my co-authors David Quinn and Gareth Collins, and also thank NLSI for providing the funding to carry out this research. Okay, so geological studies of terrestrial craters have shown that material beneath the center of impact craters is uplifted relative to the amount of the layers outside of the particular crater. So here in the example on the screen is Sierra Madera crater here in Texas. Highlighted in the colors, you can see that the layers beneath the center of the crater are uplifted relative to their location outside of the crater rim. Now, studies of various craters here on Earth have taken place, and they estimate that the amount of structural uplift beneath the crater is roughly 1/10 of the final diameter of the crater itself. A similar equation has been established for craters on the Moon, but using a mix of observations and modeling, and the uplift is roughly 1/10 to 1/5 of the crater diameter, as craters increase from about 20 kilometers to 100 kilometers in diameter on the Moon. However, the amount of uplift beneath the crater does not remain constant and attenuates, and in fact decreases depth. And that can be seen in seismic data from the Chicxulub impact structure here on Earth. So the diagram on the page is showing a seismic interpretation of the structure beneath Chicxulub, showing that lower crustal material beneath the center of the crater has been uplifted by about 10 kilometers relative to its pre-impact position. But when you go further down in the structure to the moho, you find that the moho, so the mantle material beneath the center, has only been uplifted by about 1 kilometer. And this attenuation of uplift has also been seen in numerical models of the Chicxulub crater, as well as other models of other and terrestrial craters. However, no previous studies have looked at trying to quantify this amount of attenuation beneath impact structures, and that's the aim of this particular work. So I was interested in the attenuation beneath large lunar craters, and to carry out this research, I used the ISO hydrocode model to run computer simulations of lunar impacts for the Moon. The parameters I looked at, I varied my impactors between 40 and 120 kilometers in diameter, and looked at impact velocities between 10 and 20 kilometers per second. We divided our target into 2 layers. We used a crust, which is normally 60 kilometers thick, and that was represented by an equation of state for a broken orthosite. And then we used a Dunite equation of state to represent the mantle below. Now, many of the large craters in the basins on the Moon formed many billions of years ago, when the Moon was in a far warmer thermal state than it is today. So to take this into account, we used different thermal profiles estimating those conditions earlier on in the Moon. So in the figure, thermal profiles 1 and 2, so the green and the blue lines, were estimates for conditions during the basin forming epoch on the Moon. And the thermal profile 3, the purple line, represents thermal conditions slightly younger, between about 1 and 3 billion years ago. Okay, so on to our results. So first of all, I will show you one of the basin forming simulations to give you an idea of the basin formation process, and also how the amount of structural uplift varies beneath a basin. So this particular example is for Ointali, which has been mentioned before this morning. So if somebody could play the video for me. Okay, so you see initially a large terrestrial crater forms, and the crater then collapses inwards, forming a central uplift, which then collapses back down itself into the target. The grid, which represents different traces within the model, you can see how those are affected by the cratering process. So we'll just let that run through to the end. Actually, if you could just move on, it's fine. Okay, so the structure you find at the end of the simulation, you have the basin formed, so you have material that's been removed from the center of the crater, and you formed a slight thickening of crustal material towards the edge, which is represented by the RCA on the figure, which is the crustal annulus radius. And here I've highlighted 3 particular layers within the targets in yellow, orange, and red, showing how the amount of uplift varies depending on the depth within the targets at the crater center. This graph summarizes the results of our study. So our results here are represented by the various squares and are fitted by the blue line, which fits fairly well all of those data sets. Also plotted on the graph here is showing data from another model by Santalo and Grieve. And here the maximum structural uplift is plotted on the y-axis and the transient crater diameter is plotted on the x-axis. And as you can see, the amount of structural uplift increases as the size of the transient crater also increases. But how do our model results compare to the previous model of Santalo and Grieve? Well, for the largest crater that Santalo and Grieve study looked at was Langanus crater, which is 132 kilometers in diameter. From the equation that we calculated, we estimated 25 kilometers of uplift for this particular basin crater, and Santalo and Grieve estimated a slightly larger value at 26. Going up in size, the Silakovsky crater, our equation estimated 36 kilometers, and Santalo and Grieve estimated 41, which is still a fairly good fit. But then as you get up into basins, so for Schrödinger, we estimated about 2/3 of the uplift of Santalo and Grieve. And then getting larger still up to Orentali, which is 930 kilometers in diameter, we estimated about half of the uplift of Santalo and Grieve. Now, reasons for the discrepancies as you get up in size may be to do with Santalo and Grieve's equation was based on analysis of far smaller central peak lunar craters between about 20 to 100 kilometers in size. And therefore, the equation they came up with may not scale well up to larger basin scale impacts. Differences as well may also be reflected in the different thermal target conditions during basin formation. So as I mentioned earlier, basins formed when the moon was in far hotter thermal state than it is today. And I've also done previous work showing that a larger or a greater thermal profile results in fewer, a smaller impact needed to form a larger basin. And what of the attenuation of the structural uplift? Well, that's shown in this figure here, where the depth beneath the crater is normalized by the crustal annulus radius on the x-axis, and the structural uplift is normalized by the maximum structural uplift on the y. One thing to notice here is that the maximum structural uplift does not occur directly beneath or at the surface, but is slightly at a depth beneath the crater. But below this depth, you can see with the fits to some of the data sets here, that it follows a linear relationship and a decrease in the amount of attenuation with depth. This is just a sample of one of our suites of simulations, and we found a similar result for other data sets, and we came up with this equation to kind of fit all of our various data sets for all the different thermal profiles.
All of our various data sets.
And so the thing to find out here is the maximum structural uplift is not exposed in material at the surface, but is at some depth beneath the crater, which is roughly 15 to 30% of the crustal annulus radius. And this is due to thinning of the top of the collapsing central uplift, as this flows laterally over the basin floor, thinning material at the top of the basin, while deeper material is unaffected. Okay, so to conclude, so we've shown that the maximum structural uplift beneath a crater increases as the crater increases in size. The maximum uplift occurs at a depth of approximately 15 to 30% of the crustal annulus radius, and not at the center of the basin, at the surface of the basin. We also produced an equation that estimates the maximum structural uplift, which accounts for the lunar thermal conditions when these large craters and basins were forming approximately 3 to 4 billion years ago. We've also shown that the structural uplift beneath a basin attenuates with depth, and have produced an equation that quantifies this attenuation for a range of impact conditions. And finally, the equations that we have produced here can aid analysis of the subsurface crater structures in current, i.e. GROW, and future studies of craters. And with that, I will end and take any questions anyone might have.
Great, fantastic talk. There's a question from Clive Neal. Says, could the discrepancy between your results and that of C&G be due to the fact that your underlying layer is dunite? What if you use troctolite or norite? Would the density differences dramatically impact your results?
No, I don't think they would particularly change the results. The density difference may only be a few hundreds of kilograms per meter cubed. And in terms of the scale of the impacts and the relative density differences, it shouldn't make a very big difference at all. No.
Okay. And Juan Carlos asked, what is the estimated actual depth to the Chicxulub impact crater?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what is meant by that.
That is a good question, and Juan Carlos, if you'd like to clarify in the presenter question chat box, that would be wonderful. I was also kind of curious if you know if the Grail data will be able to resolve the amount of uplift that you're actually seeing in these, and how that might correlate to your models.
Yeah, so the Grail data will be able to analyze the crustal structure beneath the basins, and from that they should be able to work out certain specific features of the basin. So I mentioned the sort of annular bulge of crustal material, and so if they can work out that from the Grail data, then using the equations that we produced, they can take that value and use that to kind of estimate how much uplift they would expect beneath those particular craters.
Fantastic. I always like to see a lot of synergy between different missions and current models.